We are starting our recaps for Book 2, House of Sky and Breath. Welcome back. We're covering the prologue to Chapter 17 today. I am determined to be faster at talking about this book. We'll see how that goes. Starting off in our prologue, we meet a new character. Her name is Sophie Renast. She's a human, except for she's a rare human because she has powers. So she's like a veneer, but not, because she's still technically human. But she made the drop illegally. She is what they call a Thunderbird, which means she's got like electrical powers or something fancy like that. And they were supposed to be extinct, but somehow obviously they didn't kill her family line, and it's been a secret passed down through generations. So she was in college, came home one semester or something, found out family got wiped out for being related to the Ophion rebels or something, and then her younger brother, had gotten taken to a death camp called Kavala. No bueno. She then makes it her mission to free him. It takes her about 3 years to work out a plan on how to save him. That plan involved her joining the rebels and then making herself useful enough that they would eventually actually give her the information on where he was, because she didn't know where he was. She just knew he was alive, and they just lorded it over her, dangling it in front of her, being like, oh, you do this one more mission and then we'll tell you, one more mission and then we'll tell you. And then eventually she does find out where he is, so then she can go rescue him. And along this 3-year journey, she met this guy named Agent Silverbow, who's one of the few veneer who works for the Ophion rebels. And she just calls him Silver, and they fall in love, and that's about all we get about him. She then, in the very beginning of this book, is going to the death camp to break out her brother. It is the night. She's been there for a week. She was tortured. They don't know she's a Thunderbird. She then breaks out her brother Emil. He's 13. He, though, wants to bring a bunch of other kids because he's like, we have to bring them with us. And she's like, okay, I only told them, maybe 3 people were coming, but we can take 12, I guess. That's fine. So they break out of this camp. We get a little bit of demonstration of her electrical powers when she fries a gate or a fence and burns a hole through it, and they get through. The unfortunate thing is that to make sure the Ophion rebels were good to their promise and had a boat waiting for them for their escape, she also made sure to let them know, drop a bomb on them, basically. It was like, oh, I have this really crazy intel that I'm not gonna tell you unless you pick us up. So they have a lot of incentives to pick her up now because a lot of info here. She also told them her brother Emil is a stronger Thunderbird than her, so double incentives to make sure they're there to pick him up. However, the Asteri or whoever caught wind that she's got this crazy intel, and so the Hind, Lydia Servos, she has been sent after them. So they make it to the docks, her, Agent Silverbow, and these children and Emil. They see the boat they're supposed to take, but the Hind is there with her dread wolves, and it's not looking great. Okay, there's some water from either rain or the ocean or a fountain or something on the ground, whatever it is, water on the ground. She ends up electrocuting a bunch of the dread wolves, maybe all of them, most of them, and takes them out that way, trying to get them all to the boat. So they all make it to the boat, and they're like, come on Sophie, you can make it. The Hind unfortunately beats her there. She's standing there on the dock with her captain Mordock or something like that, and they have guns trained on Agent Silverbow on the boat that's floating away or something. And then there's Sophie. They shoot something at Agent Silverbow, hits his shoulder. Naturally, it's gonna be a Gorgian bullet or something that's got that magic inhibiting stuff. So he can't use whatever powers he's got. We don't know what that is yet, but he can't use his powers. So they're like, Sophie, come. And then she knows that this is probably gonna be the end for her, and the boat is floating away, hopefully to make it to another boat with this crazy rebel lady named Pippa on it. They're waiting for this info. They're really hoping Sophie's on the boat, but then they catch wind she's not on the boat, but Emil is. And then these submarines come to they start heading to sink said boat that they are all escaping on. And then there's this great light underneath that like takes out like 2 of these giant submarines or something. That's crazy. And then Sophie gets captured, and then the Hind is just asking like, who'd you tell this information to? And she's like, I didn't tell anybody. And then the wolves are all wanting to like torture her, as the Hind is well known for. And then the Hind instead is like, no, I believe her. She didn't tell anybody. So instead, we're gonna float out in this little rowboat or whatever, chain her up to a bunch of lead blocks and drop her in the sea, and the Emperor will die with her. And so she throws something into the ocean first, and then Sophie's like, it's fine, they made it out safely. In her head, she's like, it'll be good. And then she walks off the plank, essentially. There's probably no plank on this boat, but gets dropped in and sinks. We catch up with Bryce and Hunt. It's been about 3 months since the whole crazy incident of the end of book 1. They are not technically an item yet. They're still roommates, and they're still close and interested in each other, but they made a pact. Well, Bryce decided to come up with an agreement where they're gonna wait till the winter solstice before they actually just jump into all the physicalness, because they need to spend some time getting to know each other under normal circumstances when they're not on an investigation and killing archangels. Which, I mean, I guess that's fair, but also that's like a long time, because that was spring, and then winter solstice is a long time after that. So we're now like middle to end of summer. So both of them in their POVs struggling, but they're like, we have to stick. Well, he's like, I have to do it for her, obviously. Can't, she's the one that wanted this. And then Bryce is like, I can't just give up on my own agreement. And so they're battling their own foolishness that way. Then her parents are in town. They're going to go see a show of junipers, and so they go to the show, and it's fantastic. The problem is Bryce, after the end of the events in spring, has this like star crazy, like, it's not a scar, but it's like if her skin's tan, it's a pale spot. There's just this spot, and it just randomly decides to glow whenever it wants now, and she finds it very annoying because she doesn't know how to control that. So of course it starts glowing in the middle of the well, at the very beginning when it's about to start, and it gets dark in the theater, and of course it's like a freaking flashlight just bursts out, and so then she's like, ah! And so we learn that she's struggling with figuring out how on earth that thing works. And then we also learn that she, obviously the library got exposed for Jezebel, so like gallery and all that, gone, moved. Jezebel basically was like, yeah, you don't work here anymore, get out. But not in a rude way, just like in a, there's nothing for you here, so just move on type of way. So now Bryce actually has a job working in the Fae Archives, and she has a whole little office, and she does whatever kind of art thing, I don't know, she does something there. And so it's like pros and cons, and her mom is opinionated about that because she's around Fae, and she's like a bit of a celebrity now. People gawk at her all the time, good or bad, I guess, because she saved the city and everyone knows who she is, and she's a princess, daughter of the Autumn King, and she's got the Starborn power, and whoever knows that she's got like the horn literally tattooed on her back. So there's a lot of reasons people be staring at her nowadays. So she does the classic Avengers hiding disguise when she goes out in public, hat and sunglasses, and it helps, I guess, a little bit in some instances. But anyway, she's got this job, they see the show, it goes great. After the performance, and it's all great, Bryce and Hunt drop off her parents at their hotel, and then they change and they go to a party at Rune's house, which was supposed to be a small get-together, but naturally it turned into a giant party. So there's a lot of people there. They're having a great time, talking, whatever, they're joking around with Rune and Declan and Flynn and all sorts of things, and Juniper and Fury there, and so then Bryce is able to be like, congrats, you did so great, all that stuff. And Juniper and Fury are a full-on couple now. They live together, they're happy, so that's fun. And then when Bryce sees them, she like is like, why remind me why I don't have this one, Hunt? Myself, it was all me, but it's fine. While they're there, Hunt gets a notification from Isaiah saying, hey, a new archangel has officially been selected for Crescent City, and she'll be here tomorrow. So they look it up. Her name is Celestina, and the problem is Hunt is very wary, obviously, of all archangels, because he's had poor experience over the last 200 years with archangels. Rightly so. Mainly Sandriel and Micah, both of who are dead now because they were terrible. So he is hesitant because there's no one he knows who knows of this archangel, Celestina, who has anything bad to say about her. So he's like, this seems sus. Alright, nobody has anything bad to say about her. She comes from such a small area. Like, her territory wasn't a full territory. There was not very many people there. She didn't have her own triari because that's how small it was. So, like, I don't know if it was a garrison. Whatever troops she had just answered directly to the Asteri. So, like, they are weary, mostly Hunt. Hunt is mostly weary that she could just be a puppet of the Asteri, and he's waiting, like, what's the MO here? Why would they appoint her here? Probably would be that way for literally anyone that they've appointed, but in this case, weary of Celestina, okay? So they find that out, and obviously he tells Fury and Juniper, so they're discussing potentials, situations on how good or bad that could be. Cutting over to Rune. This is where, if you ever hear any fan edits, you'll know what I mean. We're our first POV of Rune in this book. His first sentence, Rune Danon, Crown Prince of the Valbaran Fae, knew exactly 3 things with certainty. If you want to know what those 3 things are, you gotta read the book. Anyway, he gets interrupted from what he's doing by Flynn, who's like, hey, Declan's new super awesome security system that he installed to alert us if anything crazy is happening, like a Crystallos demon. It's going haywire. Somebody or something is like circling the house and we don't know what it is. So get your sword, get your stuff. We're going out front. Rune begrudgingly listens, grabs his sword. They go out. Hunt and Bryce are there. Fury's nowhere to be seen, but you know, she's probably hiding somewhere strategic. And then shadows coalesce through the front door, and they're like different from Rune's shadows. They're like more wild. And then pops out a new dude. His name is Cormac Donnell. He turns out to be Rune's cousin from his mom's side. He's an Avalon prince. Actually, the Crown Prince of Avalon, or a Crown Prince of Avalon. I don't know. He's a prince from over there. And he shows up and they're like, what are you doing here? Because he happened to be at the ordeal for both Rune, Flynn, and Declan. Because he also is the one who put a sword straight through Declan's gut. So they have lots of fond memories of this lovely prince. He is like, oh, hey, I'm here to size up your house. Like, it's kind of a dump. Just wanted to check out my future bride. And they were like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, Bryce, you're my future bride. Our fathers have agreed, and you're Fae property, so hello. And she's like, actually, no. And Hunt and is like, no. And Rune and everyone is like, no. How about absolutely the F not? And he's like, sorry to be the bearer of such news, but better get used to it because that's what's happening. And then he pieces out and he leaves. So they're on that lovely note. Bryce is like, I need to get my parents out of here before they find out because I don't want to be anywhere near them when they find out this news. Like, my mother will go ballistic. So she manages to somehow convince them to take an earlier train home than the one they were going to take. Plus, then Hunt and her walk into their apartment, and then Ethan somehow sitting in there. Actually, he's not even sitting. He's passed out, unconscious, bloodied up on her floor in the kitchen. Didn't even make it far into the apartment. And so they're like, oh my gosh, gotta help him out. So they're, you know, patching him up, getting answers. He's conscious a little bit. Face is like totally beat up and swollen. They're like, what the heck happened? He explains that he is now a free agent. He got kicked out of his pack by Amelie and Sabine, freaking losers, because he defended Bryce, essentially. There was some article about the whole crazy thing that happened in the spring, and essentially Sabine had a quote in there that was like, Bryce was just happened to be in the right place at the right time. She's no hero. She's just lucky girl, all this stuff. We did all the heavy lifting. We're the ones, the wolves are the ones that saved the city, all this stuff. And then Ethan, below that in the article, had a different quote that was like, the only reason we were there is because of Bryce. Everything was Bryce. Don't listen to everything that you hear. Essentially was like, no, Bryce is the reason that we saved all those humans and people in Asphodel Meadows and that we closed the gates, and she's a true hero. So then Sabine didn't love that, and she also didn't love that Ethan originally had disobeyed her order. So she and Amelie are the ones that pummeled him and kicked him out. So he is a wolf without a pack. He's a lone wolf. A free agent, as they call it, so unfortunate for him. Bryce lets him crash there and lets him heal. Hunt doesn't love this. because he hasn't forgotten the way that Ethan totally was still being a total jerk to her for like 2 years. So he has not forgotten that, but clearly Bryce has forgiven him for that because she's like, oh yeah, you stay here, blah blah blah. She lets him the first night just to make sure that he's still breathing and that Sabine doesn't come for retribution, lets him stay in her bed, and Hunt's like, what the F? He could have my bed, he could be on the couch, literally any other place. And she's like, no, I have to keep my eye on him. So that happens, and Hunt's like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, I'm fine. So now it's the next day. Bryce is at work, Hunt is at work. Supposedly today he will meet Celestina, and Bryce told him to be an approachable a-hole instead of a scary a-hole, and to try to have a good impression, and just like, maybe they really are lucky, and maybe she really will be a nice, good archangel, and like they should count their blessings. So hopefully they're hoping she's really good, as they say, because not even Fury has any dirt or heard anything bad about her. So they're like, hey, maybe we'll be good. They go their separate ways. Bryce is at work, and at lunch, who should show up in her office but stupid Cormac? And so then he's like, man, the half-breeds talk a lot more than our pure-blooded fae. And she's like, remove yourself from my office, kindly sir. And then he just continues to goad her and is like, hey, yeah, get used to this life for now that you have here, because back in Avalon, when you come home with me and we're married, our women don't work, and we stick to the old ways, so you have that coming. I don't know, whatever it is. He's just a jerk, and she's like, yeah, get out. He leaves. Hunt, then, over in the Comitium, he and Naomi and Isaiah, who are all that's left of their triari, they are meeting Celestina, and so far she's actually really nice, and he's like so shocked, and he's just keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop, because when she came in, her grand entrance, she like actually stopped and like shook people's hands, and then it was like, what's your name? I'm so happy to meet you. And he was like, who is this? What is happening? Okay. And she's just like really polite, and so she's like, hey, sit down please. And they're like, please? I've never heard an archangel say please. What is this? So then she's like, I want this to be a partnership, and I really like frown upon slaves. So Isaiah is still a slave, he's still got that brand. Hunt feels a little guilty, but like, what can he do? They can't really do anything legally, and like they already got in trouble kind of for like the whole ordeal in the spring, and it let it slide that he's free, but like Isaiah has been there with him from the beginning as well, still a slave. So she is like, I've heard great things about you, Isaiah Tiberian, and like I see you as a free male in my eyes, and I will do everything in my power to continue what Micah started in convincing the Asteri to like free you as a slave. But like in my perspective, I see you as a free male, and I want this to be like a partnership. We're gonna all be working together, and like, even I want you to be able to bring anything to me, even if it's like a complaint about me. Like, this is a two-way street. And so Hunt is just like really weary. He's like, I don't know, Micah said some similar things, and like, obviously look at well that turned out, so I'm not getting my hopes up yet. But he can see that Isaiah and Naomi, both of them have like hope in their eyes, like, oh my gosh, maybe she is different. And then Celestina's like, so I do have to explain that we are getting more triari, because there's only you 3 left, and that's not a full triari. I think a triari is probably like 6 or 7 people, I don't know. So she explains that the guy who's replacing Sandriel's governor or whatever, he had his own triari, but she had no triari. And since there's only 3 there and it's not a full triari, they decided that they were going to split what was left of Sandriel's triari to stay there or fill in the gaps of Micah's triari. And so she's like, you're gonna have to get used to your new pals here, and who should walk in but Pollux, and then Baxian, who is the Hellhound. He is an angel with a rare gift of shifting into his namesake. He can shift into a Hellhound. So anyway, cool. Pollux is back. Baxian walks in. Pollux gives a smirk when he walks into the office. He's like, hello, friends. And then Hunt is like, ha, no. Boom, tackles this man. Fast forward, he's in a holding cell. Pollux is in a holding cell. Bryce is standing there being like, what the heck, dude? You really couldn't last one day. being nice, and she's like, I mean, I get it, he sucks. And she even like says some things to Pollux to be like, get in your place, sir, you scum. But anyway, she's like, Hunt, dude, I'm gonna need you to like calm down. I not excusing anything he did, but like, you also can't just go getting in fights every single day. And so then he's like, can we go home now? And she was like, well, it's not my call. And then the intercom goes, and it's the Archangel, Celestina, who's watching on the camera. She's like, yeah, I've seen enough. Keep him in line, Bryce. And she's like, will do, ma'am. And so then they start leaving, and she briefly meets Baxian as well. And Baxian said some stuff like his main comment was to Bryce about like, glad someone finally put a bullet in Micah's head. And then he leaves. And then Bryce and Hunt are like, what the? Okay. What an odd thing to say. And then they go home. And then on the way home, they're eating some ice cream on a bench. Still got this weird friends, but more than friends, but not really thing going on. And then Therian shows up on a little wave runner jet ski thing, and he's like beckoning them. Back up on what Therian's been doing. He has not been having a great summer, unfortunately. We get a little bit more of Therian's backstory. He became the River Queen's captain of intelligence, essentially kind of by luck, honestly, and like, he's like, if any of my schoolmates ever saw me, they would be laughing, because this is ridiculous. Like, I don't know how I got this job, and he actually kind of hates his job and his life that he leads for the River Queen. Turns out, some years before, he was all for getting technology and following technology and getting that into the Blue Court, and then like building buildings underneath the water where they could actually house said computers and stuff, because those can't get wet, but they need their own intelligence and whatnot, and convincing the River Queen, who's a very ancient veneer, that like modern technology is good. And so then he ended up having been ordered to teach her daughter how to use a computer, and then Therian, being himself and being a humongous flirt, flirted with her, liked her, somehow ended up being her betrothed, and she's like quite a little jealous type and emotional, and so anytime her feelings get hurt, the River Queen punishes Therian. And so this happened to be one of them, where he is punished for whatever it was. It's been like 10 years or something since he's been betrothed to the River Queen's daughter, and he regrets that greatly. And he is now on this mission. The River Queen, somehow, through the currents, discovered that Sophie Renas's body is somewhere in the ocean in X spot, and so he's there with a team to go find her body. They end up finding the iron blocks, and they find the chains, but no body, and so they're like, maybe her body like exploded from the pressure or something. But when they look at the chains more clearly, they've been unlocked. So they're like, she's either free and she just swam out of here, or like somebody took the body already before us. So he's continuing to search for this for the River Queen, because she's hell-bent on finding Sophie's body, dead or alive, and then also a meal. She wants him for whatever reason. Therian doesn't know, but he has to listen to her because she's the River Queen and he's her captain of intelligence. So anyway, he then finds them, Hunt and Bryce, and is like, hey guys, I have some questions for you. Therian, after having found no body, went to inspect some other part that's like north of Crescent City, but like close to the city or something. I don't know, some marshes that are known to have these creatures called Sobex, which put up a nasty fight. You don't want to find one. He got a report of like some abandoned boat, so he goes to inspect the boat, and it does have a life vest on it with the name of the same boat that Sophie, or at least her brother, had escaped on. But the boat is different, and there's like a lot of trash in there, and like there's clearly someone was there, and there's a scent of like a young male boy, but it's like a day old, and so he's like, clearly it looks like he somehow escaped for some reason, and he's like heading towards the city. And then he finds the arm of a Ophian soldier, which had clearly been attacked by a Sobex, so he's like, hopefully he's alive, because Therian doesn't even want to go through these marshes, because he's like, this would be a nasty place to get caught. So he's like, okay, clearly Ophion peeps are looking for this kid, and the River Queen's looking for him, and he's clearly heading towards Lunathion for some reason. So anyway, he finds Bryce and Hunt, and he's like, hey, we need to talk. So they go to her apartment and they talk, and he's like, what do you know about this information? He's just kind of like poking around, and Bryce is like, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then he mentions Danica, and honestly, he shouldn't have, because turns out he was digging in Sophie's email inbox. Turns out she had been sending emails like 2 or 3 years ago to some email address called Banshee Lover, Banshee Fan 56 or something, and they were really vague, but like talking about having information essentially, and like going to a place where weary souls can rest, and like that would be a safe place. And turns out when Tharian looked up whose email that belonged to, it was none other than our girl Danica. So he's like, have you ever heard the name Sophie Renast? Do you know if Danica ever had any connections with Ophion? And Bryce is like, what is happening? And unfortunately, he ends up telling her and Hunt all of this information, which also Ethan, because Ethan's still living in her apartment, and she texted Rune when Tharian showed up and was like, get your butt over here now. And so then turns out they all just kind of learned this information, and Tharian's just pissed. He's like, no, I didn't want this information to get out. Don't get involved. I just needed to know if you knew anything. You clearly don't know anything, so it's fine. And Bryce is like, nah, if there's a kid out there, like, I need to go help find him. And Hunt is like having some major PTSD flashbacks. He's like, no, we cannot get involved in this rebellion. Like, I just want some peace, please. He's like, I know what it's like. I've been over there, and obviously I don't agree with it, but like, I don't want anybody else involved in it. He's seen both sides of Veneer absolutely wrecked, and then humans inside their fancy mech suits absolutely wrecked. So he's just like, please no, absolutely not, Bryce. Like, if the Asteri catch any wind that you are involved, even if you're looking for this kid just to look for him, he's got weird ties to Ophion, regardless of the fact that he is a 13-year-old child and maybe not necessarily a rebel. The Asteri will see that and kill you and your family. Like, I can't have this happening. Please, no. And she's just got in her head, though. She's like, nah, I need to help find this kid. Like, it's a 13-year-old. I have to. And then also I need to find out what the heck Danica was doing with these Ophion rebels or something. Like, this girl Sophie. I need info. Clearly, I really didn't know my best friend. So that happens. Oh, Rune has a meeting with the Autumn King, and Cormac's there, and the Autumn King basically is like, Cormac's the son I should have had. Rune, you're a disgrace. He's like, this marriage is happening whether you like it or not with Bryce, because she's not involved with Hunt. Like, all my spies say that their scents are not entwined, whatever, and so like I can do whatever I want, and this is like gonna be good for us to bridge this gap with Avalon whatever Fae, because the Avalon Fae and the Velbottom Fae, they may be allies technically in the way that Fae are allies, but also they're total rivals. They hate each other, so he's like, we need this. And Cormac is also just a piece of work. Anyway, that all happens. We also get the Autumn King's name, but clearly it wasn't important enough to me that it didn't stick in my brain, but this is not a Throne of Glass situation where we never learn his name. They dropped his name. I just don't remember what it is. Oh, his betrothal with Hypaxia is like sort of on pause, but not really, because like Hypaxia obviously knows about it, and it's like she hasn't really said anything, and so it's like temporarily, it's still tentatively ongoing, but Rune hasn't really talked to her. She hasn't talked to him or the Autumn King. The Autumn King wants that to happen, and then Cormac is saying his usual insulting things about how Rune, like, good luck to Rune for marrying Hypaxia because of her bloodline issues. And then Rune's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, don't you know that the queen, her mother, had 2 daughters with 2 different sires, and the specific sire of Hypaxia was a necromancer, and turns out she's inherited both abilities of her mother and her father. So Rune's like, well, that's kind of crazy, but like, you know, I guess, okay. And they're like, oh, also, don't you know who her sister is? And he's like, clearly I don't know who her sister is. And then he's like, it's the Hind. The Hind took more after her father, though, so she doesn't have any of the witch abilities, but the Hind is her half-sister. And so then he's like, what? So we get that little bit of lore there. The Hind and Hypaxia, half-sisters. Anyway, moving on. Bryce's parents eventually find out about the engagement. Her mom calls livid, and Bryce gets equally livid and essentially is like, you have no say over my life, just stay out of it. And then Hunt and Ethan are like, yikes, because they can hear her phone call. So that all goes down. Also, Bryce and Hunt have some weird tension between them because obviously she wants to help this kid, and he's very much like, can we please think about this before just jumping like head first, please? Like, I've lived through it all. I know the consequences. I don't love this. And she's just kind of like, okay, fine, we'll talk about it later. And then he's also upset because he finds out way later that Cormac had visited her at work and she just hadn't told him. She's like, I forgot, like, big deal, whatever. And so they're having a little tiff. And then Hunt at work the next day is with Isaiah, and then Pollux and Baxton are on the other side at like whatever training room, and they're watching people in the 33rd Legion or whatever train, and they're talking, and Hunt still's unsure about Celestina, and then they get the order that Isaiah is going to be showing her around the city, and so then Hunt gets a sign showing Baxian the ropes of the city and like essentially bringing him to the equivalent of the 21st century, whatever their centuries are called, and like modern technology, because Sandriel is not very modern. And then Naomi is charged with showing Pollux around, and they don't love this agreement, and Hunt talks with Baxian, and he doesn't like Baxian, but like at the same time he starts putting some things together being like, I guess Baxian never actually, like, he sucked, but also not as much as Pollux. And so, you know, he's like, I'm not loving this though. So that happens. He finds out he's got this assignment to show Baxian around. Then they end up going back. Tharian is supposed to meet at Bryce's apartment at lunchtime. So Rune and Bryce head there. Hunt heads there. Rune and Bryce get to the apartment just before Hunt gets there, and they see Ethan is sitting in there. Tharian had gotten there already 10 minutes early. And he kind of grilled Ethan just to see if there's anything he didn't say about knowing Danica, and all that he had said was that Danica was an art history major and she really loved stuff, and there was one time she was on to this like really big paper and then she changed subjects, and he thought that was weird because Danica, if she liked something, nothing would stop her. She would still do it. So it was weird that she had liked something and then changed it, and that's all that he knew. And all he says to Tharian. Also at this point, Bryce talked with Fury and wondered if Fury happened to know any other secrets Danica kept from her, and so then Fury is like, well, she's a bloodhound. And Bryce is like, what? She's like, well, she had the ability to scent like bloodlines. And Bryce is like, I just thought she like, that was like a wolf thing, that she just had like a really good sense of smell. Didn't realize that was like a skill. And Fury's like, yeah, because when we first met, she scented stuff about me, and so then I learned stuff about her, and then that's kind of how we just, you know, figured out our crap. And that was that. And so then Bryce is like, okay, that makes sense, I guess. And she's telling Rune this as they're walking back. She's like, hey, Danica was a bloodhound. And he is like, that makes a lot of sense, because the first time he had ever shown up at a party and saw Bryce there, Danica had taken a look at him, looked at her, and it was like she knew immediately that they were not cousins, even though Bryce introduced him as her cousin. She knew they were siblings. So he's like, that makes a lot of sense. So they show up in the apartment. Ethan and Tharian are sitting there watching a sunball game, and then Ethan's like, your cat's really sweet, and Bryce immediately stops. Rune, all senses tingling, is like, oh, he can sense her fear, and she's just like utterly still. And he's like, what's going on? And then he looks and sees that on Ethan's lap he's petting a white cat with brilliant blue eyes, and it looks right at Bryce in a way that's like, you know way too much. And so then Rune's kind of like, what the? And Hunt walks in immediately because she's like, that's not a cat. Everyone immediately is like, what? They jump back. Said cat walks over to the middle of the room, and he's just like, hello, princess. And so everyone's like, whoa. And she just is like, what are you doing in my apartment, Adis? And so then the other three, Tharian, Ethan, and Rune, who have not met Adis yet, are all like, wait a minute, what? Because they know who the Prince of the Chasm is. So then Adis tells her, he's like, you haven't been doing anything to learn about your powers. And then he also drops some more lore about how Peleus sucked. And he's like, Peleus was a prince only because he stole that title, because Thea died, and then he forcibly married her daughter Helena, and then he had his starborn power or whatever. He was just a general before then, and he just sucked. And so he's like, you, Rune, have his gross power, but then you, Bryce, you have Thea's power, because I can recognize the difference in the lights. And then Bryce is like, I just thought that mine was like brighter than yours. Rune didn't realize there was differences, but at the same time that makes sense. And so he's like, yeah, you need to learn your powers. because we're fighting the same war that has been fought for 15,000 years. And he continues to explain that Hell is not interested in taking over their planet, but they are interested in helping. And he's like, our armies, Bryce, Hell's armies are ready for you to lead against the Asteri, essentially, is what he's implying. And then Hunt's like, well, that didn't seem to be the case this spring. And he's like, yeah, that happened to be, those were like the pets, the animals, essentially. And Micah opened portals into their pens so they could run wild, so apologies for that, but luckily Bryce was there to intervene before we needed to intervene, so thank you, Bryce. And they're like not fully convinced, but also kind of like, this is crazy. And Adis continues on and he's like, Hunt, this is the same fight that you fought, that's been fought 15,000 years ago, that's fighting today, whatever name you want to call it, the same battle has been fought. Like, there's a reason that the Asteri have pushed down the information on how they got here in this to this planet. Like, do you even know the origin of this planet? Like, who was here before the Asteri, what it was like, the information before they got here. Like, Bryce, you knew that that library was the Library of Parthos. You have all that information, you've done nothing with it, so like, what are you going to do? And so everyone's just kind of shocked, absorbing all this information, taking it in. And then Adis decides to leave. He's like, whether you want to call it like Ophion rebels or whatever, you're like, sure, get with the Ophion rebels, like, fight this battle, learn your powers so that you're ready to fight this battle. And Bryce is like, I don't even know any Ophion rebels. And he's like, of course you do. He's standing right behind you. In the doorway, shadows coalesce. Who should pop up? Cormac. But Adis doesn't call him Cormac, he calls him Agent Silverbow. Boom, guy from the prologue, the one in love with Sophie. He pops up, okay? And everyone whirls around. They're like, first off, how the F did you get in here? But of course, Adis just like, boop, disappears. And Bryce is like, that freaking demon just like opened a hole in my warts for this guy to walk right in. So then Cormac is like, there was just a hole and I've kind of been watching and I've been stalking Therian essentially because I saw that he was digging into Sophie and I'm trying to find a meal and he just kept coming back here. So I figured you must know something. And then like there was the hole in the ward, so here I am. There's a bit of some bickering as they're all realizing that both sides, Cormac and everybody else, has a lot of dangerous information because obviously he exposes Rune as like, I know that you have the mind speak power because that's how you three survived in that cave. Like, my father suspected it, I suspect it, and I bet your father doesn't know. So blackmail there because he's like, you could be a real asset to Ophion. And then Therian's like, you were in love with Sophie, weren't you? And it's right on the nose. And then he's talking about how Ophion, he's like, we deserve a better world, but then also I want to find Emil because I want to keep him out of Ophion's grasp because he escaped Pippa before they could take him, and I need to help him stay alive and not go to Pippa because that would be bad. And then he also learns what Therian found of Sophie's body, which is nothing, so now he's got hope that she's alive. But then he also is like, Bryce, I need this engagement to like as a reason to be here. I also have some missions from Ophion and that's why I'm here, but like this engagement is giving me that excuse that I need to stay here, so we need to keep this. So Bryce is like, okay, hear me out. We will be engaged for your cover-up reason, whatever we need for that, okay? That's fine, but we call it off immediately when I say we call it off, okay? And he's like, okay, but not until my missions are done because I need this excuse to be here. She's like, we call it off when I say we call it off. And he also wanted to come because he saw that Bryce had some connection to Danica and that she like knew Danica because he somehow watched at least some of the proceedings from the previous spring. And he knows that Danica and Sophie had some kind of contact, and he suspected that Danica had given some rendezvous point for Sophie and Emil. And so Bryce is like, here's the sitch. I'll agree to be betrothed just for a little bit of a time frame, but I want out of the marriage, and then I want to help. Like, we are all gonna help find Emil. You, Therian, finding Emil, and me. And then she's like, I want whatever intel that Danica has, because he's like, all I know is that Danica found out some information against the Republic or against the Asteri or something, and she needed Sophie to get it. And she sent Sophie in, and it took Sophie 3 years to find that information. And by the time she found it, Danica was dead, and so that's what she used. That intel's what she used to basically kind of blackmail Ophion to be like, I need you to get my brother out, and then I'll tell you this information, but you have to get both of us out. But nobody, he's like, I don't even know what this information that Sophie got was, so that's all I know about Danica. So Bryce is like, I want to find out what this intel was. Because she was like, if just like Fury said, you know, Danica found something on Fury, Fury's found something on Danica. And if the Asteri have something on me and Hunt right now, that we killed 2 Archangels and they could kill us at any moment just for that alone. So she's like, we need to have something on them to just level the playing field. And Hunt is like, this is a horrible line of thinking. Like, they're not going to play that game. And she's like, well, oh well, I'm just going to play this game. Then she also was like, the other condition is she needs him to teach her about her magic. Because back before the Star Sword had been selected, or Rune had gotten it, basically, Cormac himself was so obsessed that he learned everything about the Starborn power, like all the things, so that he could get the Star Sword. And then it ended up that Rune got it anyway, and so he still hated Rune for that, but you know, whatever. Anyway, they agree. Cormac, though, is like, you guys are all selfish. There's people out there dying, and you are all here with only concerned with your own lives. Like, we need a free world and all this stuff, trying to guilt trip them. And then he's like, Rune, meet me at this bar so you can at least hear me out about what you could do for Ophion. Or I'm gonna tell your father, basically, about your mind reading powers, or your mind speaking powers. And Rune's like, you suck. Okay, fine. Meanwhile, Bryce has to go back to work because it's only been an hour for her lunch, and so she's got to go back and Hunt's got to go back, so they walk in together up until the point where they have to go different directions, and they're like by an alley or in an alley, I don't know, wherever it is, they're talking, and then Bryce is like, you know, as long as we're talking about all this crazy dangerous stuff, I'm just gonna say this out loud, I don't want to wait till winter solstice. And then he is like, perfect, I don't really want to either. Didn't think that I was hiding it that well, but like, I want you. And she was like, great. So then they make out a little bit in the alley until Hunt's like, well, if you're keeping this whole engagement thing, if you're gonna keep this image that you're engaged, though, we gotta like tone it back in the public space, so can't be having that. And she's like, fine, but later tonight. And that's where we leave off.